Hi Explore, it's great to be with you again. I'm really excited to bring you another Explore video. This term we're starting a new series and a different book of the Bible called Daniel. Who can remember what we did last term, what book of the Bible we did, and who we learnt in that book? What was the man's name of the book? The book began with an A, with an A, and the man's name began with a P, with a P. Can you remember? Well, it was Acts, the book of Acts, and the guy was called Paul. Well done if you got those right. I hope you'd remember those. But we're starting a new series in the book of Daniel, in the Bible, in God's true book. Now, Daniel is in the Old Testament, which is the first half of the Bible, and the book of Acts, which we did before, is in the second half of the Bible. So we're looking in the Old Testament, and we're looking at a man, funny enough, called Daniel. We're going to look at how God works in his life. But before we look at the first story of Daniel, I want to ask you guys a question. Now, has this ever happened to you? Have you ever had a remote control car and you've been driving around, okay, and your brother or friend also had a remote control car and were driving theirs around, and suddenly you would think you were driving yours forward, and then suddenly you'd stop driving it forward, but it kept going. It kept driving forward because the other person was controlling it with their control. So you thought you were in control, but actually the other person was. Has that ever happened to you? Or maybe you're watching the TV and you've got the remote control in your hand and you think you're in control of that. Then suddenly, without you touching the remote, the volume starts going up and down, and you're not in control of that at all. And that's because someone else has got hold of the other remote and is moving the volume without you knowing. So you thought you were in control, but actually it turned out you weren't. Now, in our story, it looks like one person is in control, and actually they're not. But first of all, let's find out where the book of Daniel comes in the whole story of the Bible. So let's have a look at this setting the scene of where God's people are when we start the book of Daniel. God had warned his people, the Israelites, that if they did not turn back to him, he would allow them to be attacked by another nation called the Babylonians. He would allow them to defeat them and take them away as slaves. But the Israelites did not listen to God and kept on doing their own thing. So God allowed King Nebuchadnezzar from Babylon to come and take over Jerusalem and the Israelites. King Nebuchadnezzar came with his army and stood at the city and attacked it. Everyone was trapped inside. The Lord allowed the Babylonians to go into the city and to take over it, and to take all the sacred objects from the temple from God and take them back to Babylon. The Babylonians then took away all the top leaders and the most able people, leaving only the poorest behind. The Israelite prisoners were marched back to Babylon, where they were kept there as slaves. So they were taken out of their hometown, of their home country, and taken to a foreign country, a country they didn't know. They were taken away because they didn't obey God. Okay, taken from their homeland to a foreign one. Now, how do you think they all felt? How do you think they felt? Probably a bit scared, weren't they? Probably a bit worried. Okay, they wouldn't know where they were. They've just been uprooted. They've just been taken from their homeland where they knew everything and everyone to a foreign country with foreign languages, foreign things that they did, foreign food. I think they would be very, very worried, very scared, and they wouldn't know what was going on. And this is where we meet 4 people. Okay, so we've got Daniel, and then we've got his 3 friends. Okay, and we're going to meet them in the next part of the story. But Daniel's friends, they were trusting in God. Even though all this happened, we're going to see that they all kept their trust in God. So let's listen to the next part of the story. King Nebuchadnezzar ordered that some of the Israelites from royal family and nobility to be brought to him to serve in his palace. He was going to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them to a daily amount of food and wine from his table. Then they were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they would enter his service. Among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And the king gave them new names: to Daniel, Belteshazzar; to Hananiah, Shadrach; to Mishael, Meshach; and to Azariah, Abednego. But Daniel did not want to eat the royal food and drink the wine, and he asked the guard if he could have vegetables and water instead. Now God caused the guard to show favor and compassion to Daniel, but he told Daniel, "I am afraid of the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other men of your age? The king would then have my head because of you." Daniel said to the guard, "Please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink, and then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food. Treat your servants in accordance with what you see." So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink, and gave them vegetables instead. These 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding to them, understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of the time set by the king, he told them to be brought into his service. They were presented to Nebuchadnezzar, and he talked with them, and found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered his service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. Okay, so in the story, you've got King Nebuchadnezzar, and we meet Daniel and his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And King Nebuchadnezzar invites them and orders them to come to him because he wants them to become his servants. But before that happens, he wants to teach them how to be a Babylonian person. He wants to make them into Babylonians. So what kind of things do you make them do? So he was training them, wasn't he? He made them learn their languages. He made them eat the food that he was eating. He even changed their names, didn't he? To give them Babylonian names to try and get them to forget about where they'd come from. Now, Daniel didn't want to do one of those things, did he? And that was to eat the food that the king had set before him. Daniel didn't want to eat all the rich food that the king and everyone else was eating in Babylon. What did he say instead? Can you remember what Daniel wanted to eat? He asked the guard if he wanted to eat. What do you want to eat? Fruit and veg and water. So I've got mine here. Got some carrots, cucumber, bananas, okay, and my bottle of water. Okay, so he wanted to eat these instead of eating some of the rich food. So it might be like this. So I've got these, 4 buns, and some pop. Okay, so instead of eating this stuff, Daniel wants to eat this stuff. Okay, now what happened? So he convinced the guard, didn't he? He said, let's do a 10-day trial. What happened? First of all, what would you expect to happen? If I ate for 10 days this and drank nothing but this water, and then for 10 days I ate this, just this, and drank this, what do you think I'd look like by the end? I think at the end of these 10 days, I would look quite fat, wouldn't I? I would look a lot bigger than I am now. And I think at the end of 10 days of this, I would look probably a bit thinner than I am now. Okay? So I'd look different. So you would expect Daniel and his friends to look a bit thinner than all the other people, wouldn't you? And probably to the king and the other people, probably not as healthy. because the king thought if you're filled with lots of food, lots of rich food, then you looked quite healthy. But in fact, what actually happened? What happened? Well, Daniel and his friends looked healthier than all the other people. So that was amazing, isn't it? Now, who do we think was behind that? Who do you think? It was God. God was behind that, wasn't he? Okay, so God made that happen, didn't he? And that's amazing. So that's the first time that's the first thing we see of God doing something amazing, don't we? But that's what happens in this story, okay? And then we see Daniel and his friends being some of the best people in the kingdom, and the king really liked them and saw how intelligent they were. Now, two things. That's three. Two things. Two things I want us to see in this story, okay? And the first one is that Daniel trusted God, okay? So Daniel trusted God. Okay, and Daniel trusted God because think about where they've come from. They've been taken from their home, okay, and taken to a foreign land. They're probably quite scared and under a king who wasn't very nice. King Neb wasn't nice at all. And he was telling them to do all these things and to forget what they knew already, but to do all these foreign things that they didn't understand and didn't know. And then Daniel went against the king. This very mean king who'd already taken them out of the country. What would you expect the king to do if someone came and said, no, I'm not going to do what you say. I don't want to do that. Well, you'd think that the king might be very angry with this, wouldn't you? He might even put Daniel in prison or take him, get him taken away. But Daniel, he didn't think of that, did he? He was trusting in God because he didn't want to forget God. Okay, he carried on and said, no, I want to not do these things. I want to eat the fruit and veg. Okay, so he was trusting in God that he would be safe and that it was the right thing to do. So Daniel trusted God. But then the guard who was with him, do you remember the guard? He liked Daniel, but he was scared of the king. And he said, I'm scared that the king would be really angry with me if I did this, if I disobeyed the king's orders. But Daniel didn't say, all right then, we'll just carry on. Daniel didn't say that, did he? He said, well, let's do a trial. He came up with a plan. He was determined to do this plan. And so the plan was to trial it for 10 days. It didn't stop Daniel, did it? It didn't stop Daniel because he trusted in God. Now, why did Daniel trust in God? Well, the second thing we see in this story is that God is in control. Now, throughout the story, it looks like Neb's in control, King Neb, doesn't it? King Neb went and took over the Israelites and took them back to his kingdom. He ordered the men to bring some Israelites, some of God's people, to be his servants. And he ordered them to do all these things, to learn this language and to eat this food and to do all these things. Looks like Neb's in control, doesn't it? But throughout our story, we hear little hints of something, of someone. And that someone is God. God doesn't say anything in this story, but we know that he is at work. We know that he is in control. Do you remember at the beginning, like when I thought I was in control of my remote control car or of the TV volume, but actually I wasn't. It looked like I was in control, but actually when I stopped, actually someone else was in control of the car. That's what it's like here. It looks like King Neb's in control, but actually God is in control. At the very beginning of the story, Neb captures the Israelites, doesn't he? But we hear that God allows the Israelites to be captured by Neb. It's in God's plan. Because, do you remember why they were captured? Because they disobeyed God. Okay. That's the first one. And then the other one we see that God made the guard who was looking after Daniel and his friends, made him like Daniel. Okay, it made him like Daniel, and that's why they could do this plan of doing the 10 days trial. So that's the second time we see that God is in control and not King Neb. And the third one we see is right at the end, that God gave Daniel and his friends lots of intelligence and wisdom and lots of knowledge. And that meant that they rose above lots of the other people in the king's service. They became some of the best people that the king knew. And the king really liked them because they knew lots of things and were able to solve lots of problems for him. So it looked like King Neb was in control, but actually it was God who was in control. And Daniel trusted God because he was in control, because he knew that God was in control. He is at the heart of what's happening, even though God doesn't say anything, even though he doesn't speak. He is at the heart of the story of what's happening. And that's the same today. Even though we don't hear God or hear him speak, or we might not see something go, that's God doing something good there. Even though sometimes we don't see what he is doing, it doesn't mean that he's not doing anything. Like in Daniel, we only know that God is doing something now because we can read it. But at the time, they didn't know. They didn't know what God was doing because he hadn't said anything. But like that, we can trust that God is in control. Okay, we can trust and know that he's in control because the Bible tells us he is. And the Bible shows us that even though we don't see or hear it exactly, we know and can trust that he's in control. Okay, so we're stuck at home, aren't we? Probably getting a bit fed up of being stuck at home, a bit fed up with homeschooling, finding it really tricky, not seeing friends, not seeing people, family, maybe worried. So maybe we're worried about what's going to happen, how long this is going to go on for, and worried about the virus. But you know what Daniel's taught us today? That even though it looks like there's something really bad is happening, like in Daniel's day, they were taken out and captured by this bad king. God was in control. And God is in control today, so we can trust him. We can trust that God is in control. And I hope that that's a really good thing to hear at this time. That even though this is all happening, we can trust that God is in control. Okay. Thank you for listening really well to that. Let me talk to God now and thank him that he is in control and that we can trust him. So prayer drill 1, 2, 3. Dear God, thank you so much that even at this time where it's really hard to know what's going on and we're feeling sad or worried about it, thank you that we can trust in you because we know you are in control. Help us to look to you and to trust in you in all things. Amen. 4. Okay, so you will have got an email with lots of different crafts and colouring pages and activity pages on. There's a craft where you can cut out a piece of paper and make it look like a fruit, a piece of fruit or vegetable. If you've got paper plates, even better. But if not, just use a piece of card or paper. There's some activity pages on there as well. I hope you have lots of fun doing them. And I'll see you next week for the next part of the story of Daniel. But for now, have a really good week. Stay safe, stay well. Bye!